What's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of the new book, Solo Standards for Piano, 8 Elegant Jazz Piano Arrangements. Embraceable You, Mac the Knife, If I Had You, I Can't Give You Anything But Love, Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, Love or Come Back to Me, Love Me or Leave Me, Sweet Lorraine. It's got all the hits. I'm also the author of the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series, 3 great books that will get you started in your jazz journey, and playing solo jazz piano, the OG of my books. And today I want to talk about some differences between comping in a swing style and comping in a bossa nova style for pianists. I've been teaching a lot of bossa nova recently, and so it's been on my mind. So let's get to it. So swing style comping, we want to have unpatterned comping. We want our playing in swing to be really responsive to everything going on around us. So if you're doing the same thing again and again in your swing comping, you're probably not doing the right thing. Or you're in your learning process, right? I always recommend practicing, starting with patterns, and then going further and further away from those patterns. But swing comping, it should depend on what's going on in the solo. It should depend on what's going on in the drums, what's happening in that very moment around you. So swing comping might sound like this. I'm going to be simulating the bass line with my left hand and then the comping itself in my right. In contrast, bossa nova, we want to stick with a pattern. We want to generally choose a comping pattern and then stick with it for an entire section. Maybe with some exceptions, maybe the very last measure of a section will be different to punctuate the section. Maybe if there's a really surprising chord or if there's a hit in the piece, maybe it will change. But in general, once you get a comping pattern going, you want to stick with it for the whole time. So for instance, right, so once I establish da 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 da, right? Once I get that going, I'm basically sticking with it for that whole section. Second big difference is in articulation and in our oral image. In swing, we really want to think about being percussive. So my oral image is a brush on a snare drum. I know that sounds like I'm a Zen something. Brush on a snare drum, one hand clapping. But if you can imagine, the brushes that drummers sometimes play with, and it's going against the snare and it's kind of making a ka, 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 ka. Very, very short, very direct. And that means that I'm going to use very firm fingers. Sorry, I'm back. I gotta get back in swing zone. 2, 3, 4. We can, of course, play comps short or long, but in general, we're going to think more short, more direct, more percussive. In bossa nova, my oral image is an acoustic guitar, right? As much as the piano is a great sounding instrument, even in a Brazilian context, guitar is really the primary chord instrument in bossa nova. And so when we're comping in bossa nova, we want to think about this guitar ringing out. it's a different sound altogether. You're entering the key slowly. And I've been telling my students to have soft hands. Versus in swing, we think about having firm fingertips. So the way that we enter the key should be a little bit different, right? If I'm going into the key for a swing, I've got a little bit of snap to it, and I want to, really make an impact. I want it to be very precise. Whereas in Bossa Nova, you could see that the motion is very different, right? The overall feeling is different. And that's going to be our next point, which is that in Bossa Nova, we want to think about having a lift-off motion. And what do I mean by that? If you look at my wrist as I'm playing, even though my fingers are going into the keys, which is represented by my other hand here, my wrist is constantly coming up as I play the chord. Some people refer to this as like grabbing a tissue out of a tissue box. And this helps you come into the chord at more of an angle so that you're getting less of that really pointy sound. So I'm using that lift-off motion each time. Whereas in swing, there's certainly a few different motions that we could use. We could think of a cookie cutter, meaning that our hand, without getting tense, is essentially kept open in the position of the chord, and then you use your wrist and arm here to put it in contact with the key. Right, da, ah. My fingers aren't really moving. I also use the cat claw motion sometimes when I'm playing swing to get that really short note. So I'm actually essentially contracting my fingers in order to get that really super short sound. Another difference that we could talk about in these two styles is that in Bossa Nova, we can think about phrasing. Like, I don't want us to go crazy with crescendos and decrescendos, but we can at least have that feeling. This is not foreign in the world of Bossa Nova. I'm going to exaggerate a little bit. Do you hear how there's this, yeah, right? That's happening all the time. You don't need to make that happen, dynamically, but that's the feeling. And the way that we get that feeling on the piano is with our elbow. Da, 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 da. Is by having our elbow engaged and dragged through. Whereas in swing, we're not really thinking about phrasing, we're thinking about percussion. I already kind of wrote that here. And groove. And in terms of dynamic in swing, it's much more about accented versus non-accented. Right? We're not trying to make crescendos and diminuendos. I know you can't read that word. It's supposed to say non-accented, but I ran out of room. Okay? So instead of thinking, we wouldn't really right, this sounds dumb. That's not the style at all. But we want to play some comps a little bit louder with an accent, and then some can come a little softer. So listen. So the dynamics that we're providing in swing are based on the accents, whereas the dynamics that we're providing in Bossa Nova are going to be based on the position in the phrase. Making sense? I assume you just said, yes, Jeremy. Thank you for that insight. I'm getting weird. And then lastly, let's just talk about a couple of patterns. I have other videos, and in this book in particular, Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 1, I talk about particular patterns that we might use. In swing, I'm going to really generalize here. What we love to do with comping patterns is combine an offbeat pattern, or sorry, an offbeat comp with an onbeat comp. Kind of obvious, but if you think about comping patterns like the Charleston, we have one onbeat and one offbeat. Right, or even something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Right, it's one onbeat comp and one offbeat comp. That is a big generalization. That's not the history of jazz comping by any means, but I think it's kind of an interesting thing to contrast with Bossa Nova, where we're going to do a series of comps which go from on to off and then back to on, often over the course of a couple of measures. And the most famous Bossa Nova comping pattern in this style I know as the partito alto pattern. And I don't know how well you can see this. Let's make this bigger. I've got 2 on beats on either side and then 3 off beats in the middle. So it's on, off, off, on, off, on. Da, 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 So it gives us this feeling of swaying. Okay. Again, that's also not the history of Bossa Nova and samba comping by any means, but there it is. Now, before I end this video, I want to talk with you about samba comping, which can be somewhat in between these two. When we talk about real samba, rhythmically, it's very similar to Bossa Nova. Articulation-wise, we want it to be more percussive. So samba can take some of these aspects, especially the touch aspects from swing, and apply them to Bossa Nova patterns. So let me demonstrate that same partito alto style pattern that I told you about, but played with more of a samba/swing articulation. Right, so here I'm thinking more percussively because it's a samba, which is more of a drum-based style rather than Bossa Nova, which is more guitar and voice-based. But in terms of patterns, I'm doing patterns that are more like Bossa Nova patterns. So the samba can be like the middle of the Venn diagram of these two styles. All right, y'all. That is it. If these kind of basic comping things are really appealing to you, I talk a lot about comping, how to create comping variations in this book, Jazz Piano Fundamentals, Book 1. You can get these books as a big package deal at my website. Thank you for watching, and say something about a package. Keep it G-rated or don't. It's YouTube comments. I'll see y'all soon.